dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies.
Yes, sir.
Welcome back to another episode of The Farm. Cody, I'm just going to start out with a hot one-liner.
Here we go.
This is what it is.
Here we go.
Listen. Look me dead in the eyes, all right? Look at me. Make eye contact with me. Listen. Your strength coach is fucking up your swing. All right? Let's just start with that, all right? Your strength coach is fucking up your swing. Cody, let's talk about it. Go ahead. You start the story.
So little application here, a little real world example. Got a hitter, train remotely over Zoom. And we talk with our in-house hitters as well about this, but in this particular example, we're talking about had a hitter. We're talking about just some of the patterns that I was seeing, and it really wasn't necessarily what we were working on. I started recognizing a lot of push, lower half and upper half, and so I kind of asked him. I was just like straight up. I was like, "Are you doing what we're doing in our sessions?" Kind of just curious what his routine was away.
Yeah, before you get super deep in there, I just want to give context kind of like of how our remote training is kind of set up in the get-go. So one of the big things with like remote training, we don't look at it like a lesson type format. We don't do that in-house either. We don't see it as lessons. They're more like guiding sessions to go and all the things you need to do when you're not with us. So a lot of people think that there's like this magical pixie dust that if you go and do this lesson, oh, we got you tuned up, and then boom, you go back in the games and you hit all these home runs, and oh my God, we're so amazing, and we'll see you next lesson next month or whatever. We don't believe in that. And again, when you actually look into again, and we say that with a lot of our clients in-house as well. It's like, hey, if you're only hitting when you're here, if you're only doing this stuff when you're here, those are the type of results you're going to get. You're going to get one day, if you work for one day a week to correct these issues in your swing or these deficiencies that you have, well, then you're going to get one day of results, right? And it's only 4 days a month. Okay, well, then you're only get 4 days a month results. And again, especially with that, where, again, obviously, if you think about that people are doing this 4 times a week, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, 7 times a week, right? And you're only getting 4 sessions a month that you're actually working on this. Now, don't get me wrong. We obviously see that when you're with us, it's going to be, again, we're going to be able to progress it. We're going to be able to give you, exact feedback, back-to-back reps, what that looks like. But very different where, again, if you just choose not to swing for the whole week, or again, just go and just start randomly swinging throughout the week, with no focus, with no intent, with no correctives of things that you're actually trying to work on, that again, you're not going to get much better. Yeah. And there's some issues with that. So anyways, I just want to give you guys a background on like how we do remote training in the sense of when we do, and this client specifically is a Zoom client. And again, just so you guys know, because I know some people are going to pop off and reach out. We've had a waiting list on this Zoom clients for a minute. Okay. So there's not too many clients that we have that we do this with. We do a whole bunch of other things remote client wise though. Again, that we do different versions, but this specific client is a Zoom client, which we're actually training him in real time. Yeah. Where when he swings, we're giving him feedback as he swings. But go ahead and prove.
Yeah. And so context-wise, so I'm watching via video, right, and in real time, and I'm seeing some patterns that just aren't making much sense based on what we're working on, right? Just knowing the plan that I gave him. And so we get talking, and, there's some other little intricacies here, like, hey, maybe I'm doing it, a couple of drills, not all of them, yada, yada, yada. But the big one that I took away was I started asking about what he does strength conditioning wise, what he's doing in the weight room, because I know that's important to him. He did play football, and so that's something that they pushed a lot with the football team. And so I asked him, and he gets telling me, basic lifts, some of the main major lifts that they're doing. And then I asked about like medball stuff. Do you do anything with medballs? And he goes, oh yeah, we actually do a lot of stuff with medball. And so we get talking about what he's doing with med balls, and he starts demonstrating. And one of the very first things he shows me is how he throws the med ball, and he's literally pushing with his
like
back arm like a shot put. And so he's like pushing almost like literally one hand with his back arm pushing instead of like a scoop or like a throw with 2 hands. And so he shows me that, and instantly I think, okay, that makes a lot of sense why he's pushing his hands like in his swing, very upper half, hands pushy. And then 2, he shows me some other ones where, again, to his lower half, being cued to, again, throw it as hard as he can and to drive with his lower half. Again, not necessarily his fault, just how he's being cued. And so he's doing just that and pushing with his lower half to try to throw this as hard as he can with no particular target, no intention in mind other than just throw the heck out of it, right? And so then that's leading to his lower half pushing and actually projecting his whole body forward.
Give that example of what he was kind of doing. So like as a strength coach, if they're listening, why that, like what's the, kind of the exercises that are in this realm.
And so while there are some benefits to these, of course, just in this particular instance, so the technical term, or like the term that you probably hear more often, is hide-in. So like a lateral hide-in or like a lateral jump to like a pogo or vertical jump. So hide-in to pogo, and then literally turning once you hit the ground with the foot that you jump vertically or pogo with, is then you push back towards the wall that you're throwing it to horizontally.
So again, another visual for this, if you're not watching as well, is basically you would bound to your right, right? When you would hit the ground, you would jump straight up in the air on one leg. When you came back and landed on the ground, you would then bound back to your left while throwing and shot putting the ball against the wall or partner or, whoever you're throwing with. And again, maybe when we post on social media, we'll we'll show a demo of it. Right, it's a very common exercise, and as Cody is going to go into, and I'm going to get into like really deep of like kind of like understanding why these things are so important and like deeper levels of understanding. It's more of a CNS issue, coordination issue, some of these other things, and we're going to talk about firing patterns here in a minute. But like, keep going, Cody, with like the actual story of like why this was starting to pin an image in your head of what was going on.
Yeah, and so basically he sent me some videos of him hitting on the field with a buddy, and he was getting blown up by a BP fastball, getting jammed a lot. He hit a couple balls really far. Contact point was incredibly far out in front of the plate. And
sure, he got a bunch of spin on it.
He top spun a lot of balls, and he got jammed a lot. On just regular BP, which again too, like in our session in particular, like wasn't the case. He wasn't moving like that. And so I just thought it was really interesting because typically when we see people pushing, they're fighting for space and they're getting jammed unless they catch the ball way out front. And again, most of their power is way out front or way pull side when they do that. And so I was seeing this too, and he's like struggling with some adjustability too. Like in the one game he did play, he's not playing much this fall. And the one game he did play, struggled swinging at some bad pitches. Again, too, the push leading to like just using coaching terms, right? He's all in. There's no yes, yes, no. It's just yes. And so he's committing and cheating to a pitch early on because of that lower half push and how aggressive that is, right? And then he's trying to throw his hands or push his hands for some direction as well, but also too still fighting for space. Right. But he's fighting for space. And so he was just having some issues that I'm seeing in the video he sent later in the week after our session. And it just wasn't adding up. And then too, as we started talking about it, it starts making sense because the literal pattern that he showed me with the med ball is what he's doing at the plate now, just with a bat.
I was going to say, and contextually too on the athlete, great kid, extremely coachable. They will do anything you tell them to do. Sometimes we see issues with that with people that are too coachable, and like another version of this as well. It's because like there's such a dependency on, whatever a coach is telling him. He also too is not one of those players that's ever going to say like no to a coach or ask for context or why are we doing these things. Like literally whatever you tell him to do, he's going to do, which for some coaches, like that's like a dream client of theirs or a player of theirs. For me, not so much. But also too, I think it can be wondrous in what can happen, but also too, those clients can also be great, to bring awareness to what you're actually coaching, because they're going to do everything you ask them to do. And so when they're trying to do everything you ask them to do and you start to see some of the flaws and how you're actually coaching because, again, they're not just doing some of it and doing whatever, like they're all in. But this is a case where I guess I would go back to like biblically here too, is like trying to serve two masters. And like that's what it kind of reminds me in my head, is like there's actually no real commitment to anything, because there's this zigzag where you have two competing patterns that are trying to go against one another. That's really important. And again, wanted to point this out as well, is like as Cody obviously is going into the story, like one of the biggest things is like Cody's eyeing, there's a very big difference between seeing deficiencies in a swing and then seeing two different patterns. Is saying like, hey, obviously we've coached this client long enough that we know how he can move.
Right.
And then also seeing how he's currently moving and what he's struggling with for what period in time, that it then brings awareness to, hey, again, would draw Cody or a coach that is as skilled as Cody to think, hey, what else is going on? Because these patterns wouldn't be showing up if you were doing the patterning work that we've asked you to do. Not only that, it's not that you're just not as good at them and you're going to your normal pattern. It's that you're doing a completely different pattern, that you're going into more heavy push, heavy linear type movements that are very different, which again would cause, with all those conversations Cody and I constantly have, as we see from the strength perspective, how all those things can happen. And again, just want to give that extra context. And then Cody, why don't you kind of go into the conversation you had with our client, after that, once you identified those things, and kind of like some of the conversation you had there.
Yeah. And so it's actually funny because like right when I started pointing some of those things out, he's like, well, now that you think about it, yeah, like I am doing these things. And it was like, and I know exactly when I'm doing these things. And so, and then also too, he hits a few times every week, more off season, but he's lifting 5-6 times in the week.
Yep.
And so then too, he's going to this pattern more often than he's doing it with a bat and ball, where
traditional, what Cody's game context here is traditional off season. Let's get strong. We'll worry about the skill stuff later.
Right.
Like, these are all common beliefs. And again, if you're listening to this, I'm sure we're stepping on your toes right now. And you're like, well, why is that wrong? We're getting there. Just listen. Yeah. Okay. But in the very beginning, the same thing too is like very traditional. Let's get big, faster, stronger, all these things during the fall. And we'll worry about the skill stuff later. And we're going to get into why that's a problem and how that's misguided and the lapses in that as well here in a minute.
Yeah. And so basically we're starting to piece the puzzle together now. Like he's working out, lifting 5-6 times a week. He hits once via Zoom with me, and then usually a couple other times.
Which is an hour session, correct?
Hour session. And then a couple other times if he's got a ride to the facility, sometimes less, sometimes it's just off a tee in his garage. And nothing against a tee in a garage, definitely. Like if you can get your work in.
A lot of guys with a tee in a garage.
Yeah,
for sure.
but when it comes to how long we've been training him, and then also to some of the progressions that we're trying to do, it's like would like to get in the cage a little bit more. And so
for sure, limitations.
Yeah, and so he's getting these patterns with the med ball, or building these patterns with a med ball more right now, and reinforcing them more than some of the plan that we've developed and talked about. And so it's leading down the path of now this is starting to come out in his swing more and more often. Rather than his patterns that we're working on in our plan with the swing carrying over to the med ball stuff. Which has happened before too, is like people get cued to do med ball stuff and they start kicking back, and it's funny.
Yeah, nothing against med balls. Believe me, we use med balls a ton. It's how you use them. How you use
Absolutely. And so we get talking through that, and then basically the conversation is more about the importance of like, super blessed too with a lot of the kids that I train. Like they're extremely hard workers. The issue is how to reel them in to be more focused and intentional in their work, rather than be so dare I say old school of just like, I got to work more and more.
And I was going to say, I think that is a commonality between you and I in that same way, is that we were really hard workers, but the direction in which you are working, there's nothing worse. I always tell this to players all the time. There's nothing worse than working really hard in the wrong direction. Right. There's again, all that sweat, all that sacrifice, all these other things. You did all the things, right, that are supposed to lead to success. No, they're leading to progress, but progress where? Progress to what direction? Progress to what destination? Imagine the same thing, right? You get in the car, you start driving, you spend all the gas, right? You do all these other things, but you're literally driving in the wrong direction. So that's where we would say, Is it really progress, and is it directly linear where I work and then that equals results? No, there's so many other variables inside of that. And again, that's such a low level thought of like, oh, I just got to work harder and I got to do these other things, because that is what's commonly pitched to so many players. It's like, oh, you're just not working hard enough. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, again, you've maximized the amount of work that you could do. That's not what we're saying, right? What we are saying though is that, again, like what actually goes into that is understanding that, how I work is important. It isn't just, and again, along with that, it's like someone with really good direction when it comes into training philosophies and all these other things. And also too, let me just unhinge you a little bit here as well, just to make you feel a little insecure. Okay. Everyone thinks they're headed in the right direction, or they wouldn't be headed that way. So let's start there. So don't think about, this would be great for Jimmy. This would be great for John. This would be great for my friend Eric. You specifically, right? You should always be looking to clarify what you're training, what the philosophy. If I've arrived, okay, well, you're probably lost. You've arrived in the middle of the desert or something, okay? At the end of the day, again, you should always be looking for a better, more efficient, more effective way of how you're training. And also, too, if you're doing the same thing you were doing 2 years ago when you were 13 and now you're 15, 16, all those other things, or you're as a coach, you're still doing all these other things you used to do, yes, but you should constantly be updating what you're doing, how you're doing, tweaking things, all these other things, which everybody is doing, but also, too, again, in what direction. And again, this is why it's so important, where people will try to mitigate the importance of information. Oh, you're trying to do, then stop trying to reinvent the wheel and blah, 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 and all those other statements. Like, listen, the wheel is nothing like the wagon wheel that was first came across, okay? The wheels today there's been billions of dollars that are spent on technology when it comes to the wheel and how we build them and why we build them this way and all these other things. So reinventing the wheel, no, bro. Listen, we're going deeper in understanding. Yes, the wheel itself is important. Yes, we're not going to blocks and doing other things, but how we go about doing it and how we go about training and how we get there faster and what directions we were doing and what we understood in science at the time and were we misguided and what we were missing and all those other things that come into it, that all comes in together of understanding how, again, I'm bet you really happy that we still don't have wooden wheels. Okay. There's the whole thing about, again, and then also too, it's not just, oh, well, then we went to rubber. Yes. And then also too, that's why if you go to the tire place, they're going to ask you what make and model your car you have. Again, if you want outdoor tires, you want, again, what do you typically do? Are you a drifter or do you have a Mustang? Like I know, for example, when I had my Mustang, one time I got a flat tire on my Mustang. I brought it in to get a new tire. They were like, I think my tire was a single tire. I think my single tire was like $700 or something like that. And I'm like, bro, for a single tire. And they're like, well, these are special tires because they're meant for speeds up to 220 miles an hour. I said, first off, my Mustang doesn't go 220 miles an hour. Second off, why am I ever going that fast? But those are specific tires, right? And the reason they're so expensive is because they're meant for speed and what they can do. And again, along with that, it's not a wooden wagon wheel. Okay. So there's a lot of other things going into that. And it's a common argument that is brought up by reductionist scientists, right? Which are usually just novice humans that know very little about actually, the human body. But also on top of that as well, it's also a strategy that's used by people that are minimalist, that don't want to take the time to go into the depth and want to be okay with what they already know and just go about doing things how they already are because they feel more comfortable in where they're at. When in reality, again, you would still be with wooden wheels. Okay. We all like to take advantage of technological advances, right? We all like the new cell phone. We all like the new X, the new this, all these other things. Well, somebody had to push the envelope. Why are you reinventing the cell phone? Every single day it's getting better. Every single day they're doing other things. They're making adaptations. And again, it's not always linear. That also, you got to take that in. If you're going to be an innovator, you're going to be someone that, again, changes things, that progresses the field, that does any of these other things, you're going to have fallbacks. You're going to have issues. You are going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to be teaching the wrong thing. So what? That's in the name of progress. At the end of the day, you have to do that, or again, we would still have wooden wheels. I bet you the first time they made a rubber wheel, it probably wasn't great. Like, they had to refine the process a million times before. Again, we are to where we are today. And again, even now when they're innovating, the same thing happens. They're going to make mistakes. A tire is going to blow out. Someone's going to get sued. Yada, yada, yada. Like these things happen. It's part of the process.
And say, think about like Musk shooting up like rockets in there. It's like it blows up. Like
They
that's
blew
$1 million mistake.
Yeah.
You know?
Multiple
million.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
a
like
lot
that's
of money.
crazy. And
Yeah,
so, but yeah, it's like, and with all that too, it's like I'm not saying that everything that I've given him has been the most perfect prescription for him either. But what I'm recognizing pattern wise that I've given him wasn't matching with what he was doing. And historically, what he is doing now, pattern wise, I've seen time and time again myself and you have of why he's having the issues on the field because of the patterns he's doing,
100%.
you know, with his swing now based on what he's doing with the med balls. And so, you know, and so we get into this conversation a little bit.
And I wanted to, because I know I kind of got you off topic there, about the multiple days of hitting. So he hits with us once a week, and he was hitting.
Most of the time, 2 other days in the week, and then also too with that, just kind of going into a little bit of the struggles with that is because too he is a hard worker. But doesn't necessarily get to drive everywhere. You know, again, constraints that he has with the age and everything and yada, yada, yada. Well, so then when he does go to hit, he's trying to make up for the 5 days he didn't hit or the 3 days he didn't hit that he wish he could have hit, right? So he goes in there and he's trying to take swing after swing after swing after swing after swing after swing after swing and not really thinking much. Again, too,
reps.
not to fault him. He's trying to make up for lost time.
And also, too, again, this is a multi-sport athlete.
Right.
So, again, he is working hard. I don't want to put it like, oh, he's only swinging 3 days a week.
Right.
He's also doing football workouts, going to practice, doing all that. Like, there's a lot of things that are going on. He's trying to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, again,
good student, too.
Exactly. Really good student. Dad went and played at. Right. So again, definitely really good student. Again, also too, bigger family. I'm sure they got a bunch of things going on, and dad has a pretty successful business and things like that as well. So again, I'm sure there's some tie-ups here. Yeah. But I want the reason I think also too I want to bring this like that's normal.
It's real
world problems, constraints that we all have, that every player has, and it's something that again like because this is like a real story that is typical. That happens a lot, which is why we wanted to have the conversation anyways. But keep going into the hitting.
Yeah, and so we're kind of running into where, and we've had this issue with a couple other remotes in particular, where too there's a plan like, hey, this week, I think you would be best if you do these 2 prep exercises. Here's a med ball, right? Do these 2 with a med ball, exactly like this, and maybe these 3 or 4 drills. You know, do T, soft toss, and BP with all 3 of these drills and like stick to that. If that's a 45-minute cage session, so be it. Right? And just stick to that this week. You got
better. Just because the ball wasn't flying through the air at 95 doesn't mean you didn't get better today.
And then that goes into my point too, is like part of the conversation, and like we'll go back and forth, is like everyone wants to go to these showcases to get recruited, right? Because they want to go to college, this and that. And so they try to go put up numbers. And that's where too, I start to see like the psychological side of like, okay, well, if I do get stronger, right, and I do throw this med ball as hard as I can, maybe at this PBR event or whatever, I hit a ball at 95 off the tee somewhere, they're throwing BP and I catch one ball and hit 100. And it's like, well, that's great. But also the other 15, 14 swings that you got, like you hit 60 at the event.
Or you'll also get noticed maybe if you just hit, like maybe just put up numbers. And like what I mean by that is like longevity numbers, not just what I hit off this tee. Great. I guarantee you if you're batting 470, and again, same thing, like you're batting 470 with your, whatever, top ranked home runs in your, league / age group, all these other things. Like if you learn how to hit, the numbers will be there. You won't be trying to put up a one-time, because again, along with that, right? If someone's going to recruit you, they're not going to look at your PBR perfect game T number and go, well, that's all I need to know. All right, he hit 95 off the tee. Guess we should sign him to Clemson. Like, no, there's a lot more that goes into that recruiting process. And again, when we get stuck in that like little binary, again, like surface level thoughts, there is like, I need to go put on a show. It's like, Yes, but again, I always tell one of my biggest things for advice to guys like that too is like, hey, yo, it's just another workout, bro. Go get your work in, right? Go get your work in. Stick to your process. You know, all those other things. It might not be today. Also, too, you're probably going to impress more people with how you're going about your business than you are about trying to, put on a show. Put on a show for people. When in reality, like again, every single day should be, about that and not getting caught up in the moment. Like it's just it's a day like any other day. Go get your work in. There'll be many other workouts, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and then so that's where too, kind of going into like the trying to put up a number, but then also like the times in the week that he's working out, of almost like and I see this a lot too with a lot of our players. It's like they try to go for intensity over consistency.
Always.
Where too over a longer period of time, it's like, I mean, I witnessed this myself. It's like I would go early on, I'd go work out Monday for 3 hours in college, right? And then I'd be so sore I couldn't work out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Meanwhile, someone's working out for, 45 minutes every single day that week. It's like, well, who worked out more?
Yeah.
It's like,
or even 30 minutes, right? Like, I think that's a big thing that that adjustment, and not to go too far this direction, but I also think, like, again, to make that, it's a great point, because we talk about this with pro guys all the time, or people that fly in, they want to be here for a week, and then I don't see them for 3 months, and then they come back for a week, and it's like, oh, well, we worked on what we talked about, 3 months ago? Like, I would have progressed 8 times in between there. And also, too, with all of that, if not a billion more times, right? But along with that, I always tell guys, like, it would be better for me to see you once a week the entire off season than it would be for me to see you for 5 days and then see you for 5 days at the end. Now, don't get me wrong. We usually recommend, the intensity method, which I wouldn't even say is intensity. It's just more information heavy, is in the very first times, like when we're training with guys, we want to have them come in and do X, Y, and Z. But again, more than all that, it's our human nature where, again, all of a sudden we are all motivated, and we want to get it all rushed in a small period in time. And again, like bigger, faster, stronger right now, like I'm getting recruited my junior year, my senior year. Like I need to have these schools. I need to be stronger. This coach said I wasn't big enough, all these other things. So now I've made it in my hierarchy. I've thrown strength to the very top, speed to the very top, and at all costs, I'm going to be stronger, faster, right? More velo, and hit the ball harder with more velo, right? So all of those things together become my new hierarchy, and because of that, I start making decisions based off of that foundation that I'm trying to achieve all of those things, and then that's when it starts leading to all the things that you're going into and talking about now,
right?
And then also, too, tell him about what he said when we actually talked about those other days of hitting, like obviously trying to make up for the reps. But when you asked him about, like, hey, like, are you doing the things like we prescribed?
Yeah, right. And that's where, too, it's like he would do maybe a couple of them that, whether it's like he understood them better or they felt better to him, or maybe that was just something that has just been a part of his routine, so he did them. But he would do a couple of them, and then he would just start hitting. Like, hey, go BP, full leg kick, trying to hit the ball hard, trying to put it over the fence type swings. Yeah. And so then that also led to us having the conversation of the importance of the plan, and like why, the 4 drills I gave are so important to go in that order, and like what we're trying to accomplish with each drill and how it progresses and blends up to then you taking your BP swing. Yeah. And whereas he was, doing a couple of the drills, and one of the drills was one that wasn't even currently part of his plan. It's just something that he did formally like several months ago that he was like, oh, I think this will help. Which too, it did at the time, but that's not necessarily what was best for him at this time too. Yeah. Common like, intention with it, but how his body was responding to that drill compared to this other drill was not the same. Yeah. And so why I gave him a little bit different drill at the time too, but then he went back to it.
I was going to say, and side note, within all of that too, someone's probably thinking like, well, like, isn't this something like orientation? Like we should have these conversations or all these other things are. I would then flip it back on of also saying as well as like, hey, like, these are all coaching moments, and if you've ever actually coached athletes, you're not going over everything they need to know in this next hour. Again, that's another intensity thought. Like, as people progress, especially remotely and all these other things, these are common things that come up where it's like, hey, like, I'm not with you. Right. I'm not with you all day long. I don't have a webcam on you and like where you're going and when and how you're doing things and all these other things. Like, I need insight. And again, when you see things like that, I think it's also too more points to the same thing too, as well as like, a really good coach like you would start to ask those questions where other coaches are not going to ask those questions. And because they're not going to ask those questions, they're never going to get those results because they're able to identify the same thing, that there's obviously other things going on because of those things. And then also to actually to get to some truth, underneath it. But again, obviously, if you haven't been coaching for a long time, there's this coined phrase, which is like coachable moments, right? Where there's certain things that happen where there's a point in time. Let's say someone does something and like they get frustrated and they throw their bat, or and it's not always a big moment. Sometimes it's how they're making their PB&J, or how about X, Y, and Z, whatever they're doing right in front of you. Like there's moments where like for certain people that there's lessons that are in there that would be perfect, for them to like learn and actually learn how to train. And I know, for example, like there's like one of the big things that we talk about is like that's maturing as a hitter, is understanding as you mature as an athlete and learning how to stack your hierarchy. And then when you stack your hierarchy, there's going to be pushback because this coach, football coach wants you to do all these things and they need this and they need this. And again, for example, certain sports, for getting like a shot put / again, all this linear force is super important for what they're doing. And along with it, it's like, it's not that it's the devil at the exercise or any of those things are the devil. It's how they're being programmed, especially when someone already has really big issues with this. And this is always already somewhere where they're, pretty strong in that area. Right. And also too, like what's the lowest hanging fruit here is like, not how hard he can do X, but like, how we're going into like hitting like some of his biggest deficiencies and like where you only have so much CNS and like where you can focus your time and what that looks like as well. So yeah, just wanted to add that in as like contextually as somebody that'd be like, well, shouldn't you guys have had that convo when they first started programming? And he's, again, context, he's been with us for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes you talk about things and have probably repeated those things. So I'm like, hey, you got to make sure you're working, blah, 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 and all these other things. Like you could say it multiple times. People slip. It's human nature. That's what the point of coaching is, to get back, figure out where they're at, guide them back onto the path, and say, hey, you've been slipping in this area. This is why you're having some of these issues. This is why this is so important. This is why we talked about this in the very beginning. Remember why we talked about this? Yes, we talked about blah, 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 blah. Back
Yeah. And kind of to piggyback off that is like, by no means do I want him to not question what I give him to an extent, or even explore other information too. It's like, he might not have ever slipped if I just said, hey, don't listen to another voice. Don't let a single outside source ever come in. Maybe he would have followed, but also too, I don't believe that that's because I listen to a lot of outside sources too. And I check myself, and I know you do. And then I quiz things with these people and with you. And like, we try things and we see, okay. And then we test it with data. And it's like, if I personally believe his personal development as well it'll expedite the conviction that comes with what he's doing as he starts to trial and error with some of these things.
The stove is hot.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Was right. I probably shouldn't touch that.
Right.
That really hurt.
And then having a resource like us to ask these questions and
flesh it out for
him. Is where too is like, I didn't necessarily have, I had resources, but not one that would like you said, flesh it out. Whereas like, maybe it took me 5 years to figure out this one particular concept, where maybe it took you 10, being a little bit older, less resources, whatever, where like him, hopefully it can be, 2 or whatever, and just expedite that process of learning. What am I doing? Is how is it detrimental? How is it beneficial? What is it causing me to do? What's the purpose of this, prescription at this point in time? Et cetera. And so, to kind of.
So going back to that, you got 1 day a week. Let's look at notes here, right? We got 1 day a week where he's actually doing what we prescribed to him.
Right.
2 days a week where he's only hitting 3 days in total. 2 days a week where he's actually hitting, but like, basically doing a couple staples and also not necessarily to the highest form. He's not worried about that. He's just using it to kind of like feel like before he gets into his normal swing, and maybe it's creating some activation in some ways for him. But once he starts hitting, it's just kind of a free for all. Right. Let me get my reps in. And again, I know what this is like. The same thing too. If you can't remember when you guys were younger, like I know my experience. Like I went to academy, it was like, oh, I'm gonna get these 250 swings a day. There's no one here to throw to me, so I'm gonna hit off the tee. Then you start having like teitis and all these things that come along with it. I call it teitis, is when you get on the tee and start hitting. You just start learning. You start thinking that the tee is actually the real game, rather than using the tee to help you get better at the real game. Different thought process behind it. So all of those things being real. Okay. So like, why is this a problem? How is your strength coach actually messing it up? One of the things that I talked a lot about, and we do, one of the things is when we get pro guys, I always ask them like who their strength coach is. Right. And so one of the big things, and also too, like little, I'll just drop this into the water and let it rise here, is that, we're going to actually be doing strength here, in-house. It's something again that we always talk to them as well about like, hey, who you're doing strength with. I'm used to working with other strength coaches and sometimes the guys have other hitting coaches, other things like that's fine. It's all good. Let's talk about it. Let's get on the same page. Again, the whole point is getting you results. Also too, let's make sure there's not too many chefs in the kitchen. Because again, everybody's identifying deficiencies, but also has a different technique with how they would go about actually developing you. I know for example, if you would have got if you would have got me 5 years ago to now, we both saw the same hitter, how we would go about, programming for that hitter and what I would focus on would be very different because of how much I've matured as a coach in there. And also by experience, understanding how I can get this person there the quickest and what are the main routes. Yeah. It's not that these other things aren't happening. Okay. I see all those too, but how we're going to get there is focusing on these things first, because these things will give them the biggest results. And also too, where they are in their development. How old are they? Are they trying to get, are they in season? Are they out of season? Like, what are we focused on? All the context that comes into all that. But one of the things I do with hitters, especially pro guys, when they come in, ask them who the strength coach is. Typically, we set up a consultation call between me and the strength coach, and we get on the same page for the off season and what they're going to be focused on. And also, I tell them, when we identify deficiencies and what we're focused on, what can actually go with that. One of the big things that we talk about a lot with them as well is that, like, hey, look, we got a 2-pound bat in his hand, right? And this is happening for such a split moment in time. We're talking about technique and CNS, but we're also talking about, like, within all of that is the bigger piece is I was like, hey, I tell hitters this all the time. I'm like, listen, you can't get mad at your strength coach because you don't know how to dance. Right? Like, yes, he built up the prerequisites, the hardware is there. You have the strength, you have the range of motion, you have, again, you have all these other things, right? Or prerequisites might be there. Typically they're not, might be there. And if those things are there though, you can't get mad at your strength coach because you don't know how to dance. Like, you need to go see a skilled coach, which is like a dance instructor or something like that. Right? The other part with that as well is the bigger pieces with this as well is that, again, you only have a 2-pound bat in your hand. And then again, he's going and putting 400 and something pounds on his back and squatting or doing whatever. It's like, like, I'm not going to be able to beat the stimulus. That is, you're going between when your body is prioritizing what it cares about. It's more worried about that 400-pound load than it is about this 2-pound object in your hand that in reality, it doesn't even know is a bad pattern, because in your brain, you got, again, this is a Randy Sullivan line, right? That is like, you got to make your body give a damn, because in your brain, if you're hitting the ball, right? If you're hitting the ball and then you're telling yourself it's like a success in your head, right? Like, your brain is just trying to solve a problem as hitting the ball. So yeah, you can hit the ball and be like, oh, I suck or whatever, all these other things. But in reality too, like, your brain's not like, it's not really worried about it, right? Like, in the sense of, like, your brain's always trying to survive than it is trying to perform, right? Like, you survived, you're healthy, you're doing X, Y, and Z. Like, yes, would you like to get a little better at this? Like, for sure, 100%. Like, your brain knows that you want to get a little bit better at these other things, right? And of course, like, you're in one, so you're going to keep getting better at it, but what is it going to prioritize in its hierarchy, right? Of what it can focus on and what it needs to adapt to. So again, for example, if you're doing stimulus, load, all those other things, and like speed, power, and you're loading up with like force, right? And really we're looking at is like force here. We're talking about, again, a whole bunch of weight on your back, or it could be a whole bunch of speed, right? All of those things both are going to create a whole bunch of force. And again, along with it, like, your body's going to prioritize what it needs to do to adapt to the demand that's being placed upon it and what we need to do with that. And so again, along with that is, like, a lot of times, and this happened, again, I mentioned where at one point I was consulting for an organization. I went inside there, I watched the strength coach, I watched the hitting coaches work with guys for a couple hours. And then I watched strength guys start working with dudes. Primarily, strength coaches usually also come from a football background, right? A lot of strength coaches come from a football background. And when that happens to be the case, they love to build sagittal monsters. These guys are, again, also thinking things of frontal planes, sagittal planes, and also too, anything transverse is like, oh, all I have to do is rotate and we're good, right? When in reality, when it comes into rotation, like your body doesn't care. You're building skills that your body doesn't care. I always say rotation is rotation is rotation. It doesn't care. You're teaching your body how to rotate and how to strike objects or how it needs to align itself. So if your goal is, let me just rotate as fast as possible and throw this ball against the wall at all means necessary, and then you cue them up and say, hey, it needs to be a shock put, right? Well, then you're teaching your body how to get to extension and rotate by pushing and creating horizontal forces. Does that create rotation? 1000%. That is a way of creating rotation. There is a problem with that when I'm actually hitting, and also along with it, with the patterns and what it does to my CNS system and coordination patterns, and what it does when I tell my body to rotate now, and now I have a bat in my hand. Again, also you got the bigger stimulus, faster speed. Why are we moving at a faster speed? Because there's no variables. I'm throwing a ball at a wall. That's my only variable. Do I have to catch the ball off the wall? That's at least one variable, right? Like I at least have to stay kind of square and have to catch it off the wall. I have to brace something, stick it, all those other things. Awesome. That's one, you can at least add that into it rather than, again, even when I was looking at this organization, they were literally just throwing med balls from a scoop toss at least, but from a scoop toss, throwing med balls at the wall as hard as they could. These guys were like spinning like ballerinas, like when they're throwing the ball. And again, I just saw the same coach, sorry, not the same coach, the same player in the cage with the hitting coach, and his problem was over rotation, right? So we got 2 hours in the cage doing this. Then he goes into the hitting room. We got to work on transverse now. And also, too, are we even monitoring load now? He just had 2 hours hitting in the cage, and now we're doing a whole bunch of more rotation stuff. Does he even need rotation today? Yeah. Maybe he needs anti-rotation. Maybe we need to practice a whole bunch of stuff on breaks. How about on the opposite side? Maybe he does need a lot more sagittal stuff now because we've already probably accomplished the transverse here, especially in that direction, right? So all of that put together, right, of monitoring, putting all those things together, and then along with it, first off, if you can name me a single coach, I don't know one. I don't know a single strength coach that I know has been fired because a guy had a bad swing. Usually a strength issue. Guy's going to get fired, but it's because of injury, all these other things, right? That's what gets associated with the strength coach, right? And how they're training, all like X, Y, and Z. But performance, that's why I like the title of strength and performance instead of conditioning in the same way on everything that's associated with it. But your role is performance. If they're not performing because of you, right? And then somebody wants to flip it and go, well, man, that's not fair. How about because of me, blah, 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 all these other things. Okay, well, again, it's going to get associated with the hitting coach. So if he's moving this way because of you, because of how you're programming and things that you're doing along with it, yes, does he have a role in this as a player? 100%, he's going in. But at the same time, right, you're held to another standard that, again, along with that you have to take ownership and extreme ownership, just like I have to on the same side. All performance, if it's the strength coach or not, and I didn't figure that out, and the strength coach was the one messing up, and that's the reason he's not hitting, still my fault. When we want to come to the hierarchy of what somebody's fault, okay, hitting coach, definitely above strength coach, but I'm also going to throw this in there as well. I have to take responsibility for all of his performance when it comes into that, but it also means that I need to understand what you're doing on the strength side so I can understand on top of that, if you're doing something that is hindering his performance that I'm responsible for, that I'm going to get fired for, well then, again, let that be if I work for an organization, let that be if I'm the hitting coach for school and we're not winning, right? Let that be he's a private client and whatever that is. And again, I'm going to get fired as his personal hitting coach because he's not hitting. All those things fall underneath my ownership and something that I have to take ownership of, because if I don't, someone's going to take it for me. And again, I won't have a job. Okay. So that's step one. Step two on the other part of that as well is just understanding that from a strength perspective, it's not, your body doesn't put things, we do that as human beings. We like to compartmentalize things and put them in all these little pretty buckets and go strength over here, technique over here, mental performance over here, all these other things. And that's the exact way that we try to understand nature. We break everything into sciences and we say this little bucket, this little bucket, this little bucket, this little bucket. The brain, the body, nature knows no science, right? It's operating out of all these areas, and all of these things are happening simultaneously, and everything is intermixing, right? And so for all of those things to happen all at the same time is we need to understand that when we put everything in these pretty little buckets is that we put them all back together again when it comes back into performance. And again, it's not about pointing fingers and saying you're messed up. The whole point is performance and getting him actually to perform. And just like in nature in the same way is putting everything together, seeing how all these things are intermixing and what the overlap is here, and what the problems are. Now, along with that, your hitting coach could also be messing up your swing, and most likely he is or she is, whatever that is, right? And also, too, strength coach, most likely they are, right? Most likely they are messing you up in one way or another, right? Again, if you came and hit with me, I tell hitters, I tell hitters all the time, like, yo, like, I'm going to tell you something today that I'm wrong about. I'm probably going to progress you too fast. Maybe I'm not progressing you fast enough. Maybe again, X, Y, and Z. Maybe I gave you the wrong drill at the wrong time. Maybe I said the wrong thing at the wrong time. I'm going to mess up too. But what we're trying to manage is again, that basement compared to the ceiling, right? Is when I'm wrong, right? How long are we wrong for, right? And how quickly can we get back on path? And actually fix these things. I try things constantly all the time. The next session, you might never do something that we did last session, right? And we might move on, okay? So it's not that, let's get this base level foundation. Everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong. If we're all right, again, first off, like we'd be God, okay? We're not all right. We're all wrong. We're all progressing. But the whole goal is to be less wrong tomorrow. And again, as a coach, your role should be to be less wrong. Right? You need to be less wrong than all your competition. If you're an organization, you need to be less wrong than all the other organizations. If you're a coach at a school, you need to be less wrong than all the other coaches, right? Like your job is to get there. So again, on the opposite side of that, of taking no ownership. And again, as a coach, if you're just sending your guys into the weight room and go, whatever he does with them, I don't care. It's lazy. Like it's lazy. You need to know how your coach, your players are good, what they're doing in the strength room, what they're doing. And also too, you can't just go, I don't need to know anything about that. That's like me as a CEO going, I don't care what that department does. Like, I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. I don't need to know anything about that. Like, of course I do. And also too, if they fail, I fail. So again, the same thing too as well. Like if they fail in the weight room and we're blowing out knees, elbows, guys' performance, all these things are happening, and I'm saying, I don't need to know about that. I don't care. Well, you're probably not winning too much. And please, maybe thank the Lord, hopefully, that the guy over there might know what he's doing. And again, maybe he's really making your coaching look a lot better than it is. And when you switch schools, all of a sudden your performance drops off dramatically because your strength coach was actually taking on and actually fixing a lot of the things that were having issues that you were teaching on the hitting side. And maybe he was overriding your stimulus. And then now you don't have a strength coach that does so. And now you're seeing this big drop off is like, there could be a bigger play at, what's going on. So I think some of the biggest things, and again, to the story, and the main reason that we wanted to point this out is like, one, you need to hold yourself more accountable. You need to take more ownership. Okay. And then two, on the same side as that too, is like, we got to start looking at strength coaches that they are very responsible for performance, right? And it is very important for them to actually understand and there be a mesh, right? Not compartments, a mesh of understanding from the strength side and the hitting side. They also can't just go, I don't care what they're doing from the hitting side. I don't care, right? Strength coach needs to understand what you're working on with guys. There needs to be a profile of what we're working on in the crossover between that. Any high-level facility, all those things are doing that, right? Been doing it for years. Organizations been doing those things for years. The best organizations that do it the best typically have the best results, right? So along with that, again, it's just all these things that you have to intermesh all those things together. And also too, again, on the same side of that is a lot of times I've seen it more often than not, right? That how guys are training in a weight room is actually, again, not only on top of when they're in search of strength, force, all those other things, but they're also having issues. Because when you go in the weight room, you remove all of these variables and all of a sudden it becomes just a fest on how fast can I move, all these other things. And why can't I just worry about skill later and just take this as, a base level, right? But it's like how you're recruiting, what muscles and what technique you're using to create that is going to leak over to the opposite side. And And it's something that, again, that we need to continue to be mindful of. Not just, that it's a small deal and, okay, I'm going to throw it on my thing. Like, no, it's like one of the top things. And that's why it's one of the first things I have conversations with guys, when especially comes into pro guys, when I'm looking for giving guys results in a really short window of time, is understanding what their strength guys are working on and what that looks like, and how to have those conversations and get everybody on the same page. Because it's really important, again, for a hitter to actually get results, or a pitcher in that same matter, for them to actually get results or not. And that could be a big thing there. So what do you got, Code? Sorry, that's one.
No, I mean, I think just the last thing I really have is while there's measurables in the weight room to make sure that you're making gains, getting stronger, getting faster, quicker, more explosive, etc., all these different terms that people want to use, the test is the game. And no one goes to a strength coach that plays a sport to not get better at their sport.
Yeah.
Like their goal is to go get better at their sport. They want to get stronger, faster, etc., for their sport, not just cause, And so while there are measurables in the weight room to hold yourself accountable, ultimately some of the best strength coaches I've seen are also very in tune with how their players are performing on their respective field, court, etc. And not necessarily out there teaching them how to hit, but they are paying attention and are working together with people to perform in their respective sport as well. And so, that's pretty much all I got.
And then the last two things, and again, I'll go nerd with you guys too. The big things that you should be focused on in the weight room. One is neuromuscular efficiency, right? Is understanding not over recruitment, which leads to my second point, which is not developing compensatory patterns. Right? Now, don't be wrong. There's going to be a point of compensation that we need to have to, again, make sure we don't get injured. Maybe I slip. There's
right.
Again, within context, right? Hear me here again. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Okay. But it is very important that, again, more often than not in a weight room, we get compensatory patterning as a dominant pattern, because we're not focused on neuromuscular efficiency, which is not how much can I recruit, but how little do I need to recruit to get this done, right? So super important along with that is over recruitment is a common thing that's taught in weight rooms, especially when it's a fest of how much force can I create, and again, the speeds, all those other things that come into it. So big thing there. I'm going to pray us out because we all know that we need Jesus to fix this problem, all right? So we're going to get into it. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us here today. We're thankful that you can continue to speak through us in different ways, that you can continue to bring in awareness to what's going on in our lives, in ways that we can continue to move forward and grow and learn how to guide others and definitely the next generations, and to make them better than us and continue to spread your kingdom, God. We just ask for your guidance. We just ask for your deliverance, God, and that you continue to mold our hearts and keep our eyes focused on the main mission, which is growing your kingdom, God. We ask for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, until next time, Farm System out.